Hey there. So I want to talk today about a plant that's in my yard. It's one of the earliest plants that does anything in the spring, called a pussy willow. This here is the pussy willow. It's a harbinger of spring, and when you start to see the catkins, which are those fuzzy white things, pop out, you know that warmer weather's on the way. And this is kind of a concept that exists in many cultures. This is a native plant, so indigenous people definitely saw the pussy willow as a harbinger of spring, but there's also a European variety of this plant. And you know, there's traditions from Poland, and you'll see it in St. Patrick's Day advertisements, and really just any sort of general springtime artwork will often feature a pussy willow branch. Now, one thing you do want to be a little bit careful with is where you plant this thing. These have aggressive kind of spreading roots, and my understanding is they can damage septic systems and pipes and things like that. So just be careful where you put them. They will absorb a lot of water. I have mine kind of next to the driveway here. It'll absorb that water that runs off. So it can provide a benefit, but it can also create a problem if you put it in the wrong spot. So just keep that in mind. But if you've got a spot in your yard that gets a decent amount of sun and has moist soil during a lot of the season, that's not near any pipes or any plumbing, go for it. Great plant for that type of spot in your yard. All right, right here, these are the catkins. These are the fuzzy little white things that pop out. Usually around mid-March. I usually notice them around St. Patrick's Day. This one here has been pecked off by a bird, so just keep in mind these can be used as food and nesting material by some mammals and birds. Around early April, these catkins will be replaced by little yellow flowers that are very popular with early spring pollinators. Basically what happens is, provided you get some warm weather, usually above 55 degrees or so, and as long as that overlaps with I'd say it's about a week-long period at which those yellow flowers are out, you'll get an absolute swarm of activity on your pussy willow. It's pretty cool, actually, to watch. You go outside, there's all these little mining bees and other little pollinating insects, and they just sort of swarm the plant. And keep in mind, these are solitary bees. They're not aggressive, so you can get up there and kind of watch them do their thing up close. And, considering it's only a week and the weather's so variable, you might only see it for a few days, but a very cool thing to watch. As spring progresses, once you get past the catkin stage and the flower stage, this thing will eventually produce green leaves, and it will become, it can only be described as like a green blob. It's just a big green leafy thing. Doesn't look very interesting. That said, willow leaves are edible by an absolute ton of insects, hundreds of different species. Probably the top one that people might want to attract, or one that comes to mind, is the viceroy butterfly. They are a monarch lookalike. They're a little bit smaller. Their larvae will eat the leaves of willows, including pussy willows. One other thing to keep in mind about this plant is it grows very quickly. So, this thing will add feet, lots of feet in a year. And so people often prune them. And there's multiple reasons for doing so, but there's also some drawbacks. So you do kind of want to be aware of some of the implications of the when and how you go about doing so. The main reason to prune these plants is because you want catkin growth. The catkins in the flowers will not grow on old growth from last year. So usually what I end up doing is cutting it kind of down about this level once a year. And the reason I cut it way back like that is that I want to be sure that we have catkins that are eye level here. It's more attractive in the spring. That's the one time a year that the plant actually looks kind of unique. What you don't want to do is you don't want to prune it too late in the season, because you will cut off all that new growth. You'll just eliminate any chance of the new catkins growing. So usually kind of the middle of the growing season is when you would do so. Still, while that might benefit early season pollinators, you're going to have more catkins, you're going to have more flowers, you are cutting the plant back. Usually I'm cutting probably 2/3 of the plant off. This is food for viceroy butterflies, and so you are potentially eliminating them. The issue is the Viceroy larvae, they kind of look like bird poop. That's what they look like. They look like, a single bird dropping on a leaf. And so it can be hard to even notice they're on the plant. And so, you're kind of in a lose-lose situation a little bit if you're trying to support the Viceroys, because they have 3 broods during the year. So there's 3 generations of Viceroys. And so there's almost always a chance that there's larvae on these things. So in my mind, you want to make sure you're past the spring. You don't want to cut the plant back before the flowers are done, and that part of the season's over with. Similarly, you don't want to cut it too late in the season, because again, you'd be cutting away all that new growth before it has a chance to regenerate. So my recommendation would be to prune in like late June or something like that. That gives enough time for the spring brood, which actually overwinters in the dead leaves, usually below the tree, I believe. There could be caterpillars down in that leaf litter. You want to make sure that they have time to emerge, to climb onto the tree. The leaves aren't going to be on this thing until kind of mid-spring or so. By late June, hopefully, if you had caterpillars, they've completed their life cycle by that point. So, late June, early July, prune this thing back, and that's probably the ideal timing. The other thing you can use the willow branches for is like crafts and things like that. So people will make baskets or fencing out of those branches. They're very bendy, so you can kind of weave them into one another. I don't let mine get real big, so it's not like I ever end up with like an absolute massive amount of wood. But you can Google these elaborate art projects that people make out of willow wood. So you can do cool stuff with it. Just keep in mind, if any part of the stem ends up in the ground, make sure that the stem is dried out, that it's dead, because pussy willows will, if they're freshly cut, you put a stem in the ground, it'll grow new roots. But as long as it's dried out, you can use it however you want. Make a little fence or border area or something in your backyard. Kind of cool.